All right, so welcome back, guys. For today, we're gonna be continuing the conversation that we had from the last video. So, if you recall from the last video, we talked about a little bit of a story on my experience with losing weight and why it always isn't necessarily the most appropriate choice for some people. And so feel free to watch that video if you haven't. It's the last one I believe that I posted. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, or pretty much the main thing for today that goes along with that, is if for whatever reason you are interested in either losing or gaining weight, my recommendation on how to actually approach that. Like I said within the previous video, my experience was kind of all over the place and it wasn't ideal. So I really don't want to see anyone kind of go through something like that because it is not a healthy thing to do physically and also mentally. So I'm going to walk you through some tips that I have for how I approach weight loss or weight gain. And like I mentioned in the previous video, for me right now, at least at this point, I'm not really one to go on major bulks or major cuts. I prefer just to stay around like a range of weight that's healthy for me. If I want to gain a little bit of strength, I don't mind gaining a little bit of weight to help me do that. But I by no means go something or do something crazy like gain like 40 or 50 pounds in like a month or two to achieve strength. I don't do that. So because of that, I like to keep my bulks or cuts pretty tame, pretty controlled in that I know what's going on at all times. I don't have that many variables that are kind of making it seem confusing in terms of like why I'm gaining this amount of weight or why I'm losing this amount of weight. Like I say, I tend to keep things pretty controlled. And so I'm going to kind of share those tips with you guys today. So first and foremost, regardless of what you're trying to do, losing weight or gaining weight, one thing to know, something important to know of if you're trying to go through that process is understanding what your maintenance calories are. Now, your maintenance calories are just the number of calories that your body consumes per day to maintain its weight. So that is... there's a lot of things that go into that number. Your height, your physique, your stress, sleep. These are all things that play some part into this, some a bit more than others. But there are general calculators out there for you to use to find out and estimate, especially if you're just starting out. After you kind of get that estimate, I'll show you how to go about kind of making sure that number is 100% accurate to you, but it's always good to get some sort of baseline just so you don't run the risk of getting a number that is nowhere near where your actual maintenance calories are at. So, and I'm going to be pulling up a screen here to kind of show you what I do, or at least what I did in the beginning to do this. So there's a ton of calculators online to help you find this maintenance calorie number for you. Right now, if you were just to do a quick Google search and type in like maintenance calorie calculator on Google, the first link, you can go ahead and use that. That's what I'll be showing you today, calculator.net. You might also see a couple of other calculators called TDEE. Those are essentially the same thing. That stands for total daily energy expenditure, if I recall correctly. And that's essentially the same thing as maintenance calories, at least in this context that I'm talking about. So you can choose either of these really. But just for the sake of this video, I'm going to just show you with the first one. So when you click on that, there's a ton of things going on here. I'm really just going to show you on the things that I would focus on, especially for just getting that baseline down. So when you click on the link, it's going to give you or bring you to this page. You start filling in these questions here. So your age, so for me, I'm 25, male, right? So your gender, you select that. Your height, 5'10", or whatever your height is, and your current weight. So right now I hover around like 178, and activity. So this is something that's going to be very dependent on the person, based on how much activity you pretty much participate throughout the week. So either with your job, if it's very demanding and you have to move around a lot, or if you just go to the gym, maybe you're working an office job so you don't move around as much, but you do go to the gym, that's something that also kind of will play into this answer. So there's a couple of different options here for you, right? So little or no exercise if you hardly do any sort of thing throughout the week. A lot of cases that's not really for most people, but some people that is the case, at least to start off with. Light exercise 1 to 3 times a week, moderate exercise 4 to 5 times a week, and so on. So do your best just to get a best judgment, or use your best judgment to make the call on whatever option is most accurate for you. BMR, so basal metabolic rate, you can also choose that option if you'd like. Basal metabolic rate, essentially what this is the calories that your body naturally burns just by existing. Like you by existing and you breathing, body working and doing all these things. Again, it doesn't take into account activity level. Those are, your body requires a certain amount of calories for it just to operate, just to exist, right? So that's what that is, hence why it's kind of at the lowest option here. So if, say for example, you want to use this number, and maybe you are tracking your activity level in a different way, then maybe you could just add those two numbers together if you'd like. So you take your BMR, which is just like your calories for your body just to exist, and then you add on the activity level on top of that. So that'll give you your total TDEE, right? So you could do that, but for a lot of people, that's just too many steps and they don't have that activity number to get. So you can just choose one of these other options to take that into account, right? So for me, I'm just going to say I go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. That's when I tend to do exercise, right? I'm going to choose moderate exercise for me. So that's what I'm going to select. So once you do this, you don't really have to choose anything else. You can check out the other options, but again, especially for people just starting out and they're trying to figure out what this number is, I try not to complicate things so much. I try to recommend to keep it as simple as possible. So just go with this, and then you can get that base number at least to start out with. So when I hit calculate, this is where I'm going to be getting the number here that I'm looking for. So maintain weight is what you're going to want to grab. So for me, it's 2,635 calories a day. That is a rough estimate on how many calories I burn a day in order for me to maintain my weight. So that includes the activity level that I do in that day as well, right? So once you go ahead and have that number, that is the number that you snag. And at this point, once you have this number, depending on if you are trying to gain or lose weight, quite honestly, I would give yourself a week just to make sure that that number is actually your maintenance number. So what I mean by that is you pretty much feeding yourself that amount of calories every single day for 1 week, and check your weight daily at the same time each day. If you see that there is no change in your weight after that week, right, and you'll be able to kind of see each day as well. If you see that there is no change, then you know that is your actual maintenance calories weight. So you can just use that number moving forward. So you can, in a sense, kind of make sure and solidify that that is actually your number. If you see some sort of change in the scale, then you know that maybe isn't your actual maintenance calories. So if, for me, as an example, if I see on here that my maintenance calories is 2,635 and I go through a week of just eating that amount of calories and I see that I've actually gained weight, then I know that this maintenance weight is probably a little bit too high. I might have to lower it a little bit. So maybe I might cut it by like 100 or 200 calories. I wouldn't do it by a large amount. I would do it maybe by like 100 or 200. That's completely just based on how much weight you gain, but most likely you probably won't gain a ton, or it won't be too different than your maintenance. So once you go ahead and make that adjustment, try it again the next week. And then after doing and repeating this process, you should reach a point where you are able to maintain your weight at whatever number you end up coming up with, right? And the same thing applies if the number is maybe 2,635 and maybe you lost a little bit of weight after a week. Maybe that means that the maintenance weight number, it's a bit too low. So you might have to kind of up it up a little bit, right? So you repeat that process weekly. It shouldn't take you very long because these calculators give you a decent sense. It's not going to be too far off. But you repeat that process until you essentially reach a number that you're surviving off this for the week and the scale does not change. And then after that point, that's when you can really that's when I would recommend you to take the cut or bulk a bit more seriously, because you have the data that you need to keep it as controlled as possible. And the reason why I even bring up controlled, and why I, even for beginners, think that is a more a better approach than just kind of going all out and eating whatever's in sight. Some people, and I'm going to use myself as an example, when I first started, didn't have a good gauge at what I needed to eat to not gain weight or lose weight too quickly. That should never really be the goal for anyone, especially if they're trying to make this type of diet sustainable. If you are, and there's athletes out there that you might see that do rapid weight loss or weight gains, for a specific reason. But a lot of the times those individuals are a bit more experienced, so they know how to go ahead and kind of maneuver that. But for a lot of people, they don't. That's just the reality of it. And it's not a very healthy thing to do, because you're not going to be feeling the greatest, right? And that goes with if you're eating too little or eating too much. So hence why I recommend people, regardless of what you're doing, to keep it controlled and keep it not too extreme. So if you are trying to be gaining weight, in the process of also maybe building muscle, I would say maybe gaining about like half a pound at most to a pound a week would be reasonable. And for a lot of people, that's just eating like 200 or 300 calories above their maintenance, above this number that we just talked about how to find. And the same thing goes with losing weight, maybe trying to eat 300 or 200 calories less a week, or I guess below your maintenance calories a day, eating 200 or 300 calories less a day. And that way you'll be losing weight at a pretty steady level. And you also won't be starving all the time, because if you drop the calories too much, yes, you will be able to lose a lot of weight, but you're not going to feel great. You're going to feel fatigued, tired. And especially if you're doing weight training on top of this, which I recommend you to do in general, you're not going to be able to perform as well. That's not so much. Some people are able to do it better than others, but generally you're not going to be able to perform as well, right? So there's got to be a balance with this stuff, is what I'm trying to say. And by you taking it slow, as long as you have no pressure or no rush to get to a certain goal, which a lot of people really don't, then I'd say just keep it slow and take it slow and keep it as controlled as possible. If you have maybe a day or two, because it does happen, and I've talked about this in my previous videos, where, I do this stuff like fitness and all that. My life doesn't revolve around fitness. Fitness kind of revolves around my own life. I feel like that is something that's also super important for a lot of people to keep in mind, because you want to also enjoy other aspects of your life if you so choose. And so that's the case for me. So if I, for whatever reason, maybe slip up a day and I go out and maybe I go a little bit above my calories or go a little bit below, it's not the end of the world. Literally, all you have to do the next day is just get right back on track. Don't try to do any sort of excess cardio or more exercises or whatever it might be. I wouldn't really recommend that unless you really want to. The issue with that, if you do start doing that, is you will slowly start to trick your brain and almost look at food as a bad thing. I only say that because, again, it comes from experience. I went through a point where if I ate a little bit more than what I was supposed to, I would almost think like that is a negative thing and I have to go ahead and work it or burn it off later. And it would be such a burden for me and my mind, because I would always view every single social interaction with food as like a burden, like, oh my God, I have to go burn this later or something. And then that just ruins the whole fun of it for you, right? So don't view it like that. Don't train your brain to do that. And the way that you do that is, if you do slip up, just treat like nothing happened and get right back to it the next day. And that's literally it. keeping it simple, keeping it consistent. Consistency is going to be the biggest thing that is going to help you reach your goals here. It's not one day that you slip up. So that's where I'm going to leave that off at. Hopefully that does help you if you are like wondering how I go about losing or gaining weight. Again, the amount that you gain or lose, that's going to be totally up to the person, but I wouldn't recommend doing it in the majority of cases in any extreme sense, right? If you're gaining weight, maybe 0.5 to a pound a week at most, or if you're losing weight, maybe a poundish a week, right? Maybe 1 to 2 pounds a week. But more than that, I would say that you are kind of getting more so into that extreme sense. So just keep that in mind, and you'll honestly probably notice that just based on how you feel. If you feel terrible, if you feel shitty, then you might be just doing it a bit more extreme than probably what you should be doing. So, all right, guys, I hope that helps. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. So we'll go ahead and pick it up the next time. All right, peace out, guys. Thank you.